What is up, everybody? This is the first time trying this vertical live that YouTube is pushing as of late. Supposedly, this is supposed to show up in the shorts feed as well, which means to you regulars, this chat might get a little bit crazy if that is the case. But the ultimate goal of tonight is to talk about trade possibilities for the San Francisco 49ers. Now, it's a very exciting time to be a football fan in general. Free agency starts tomorrow. Well, legal tampering period starts tomorrow. But we're going to know of a lot of deals by what I would say 2-3 tomorrow. Bunch of deals going on. So no, I'm not using my phone. This is going to be in the shorts feed. So it's all vertical video. It's something that YouTube is pushing. So figured I would try it out, see how it goes. Which also means that the chat's going to get crazy, Brother Bob. So pay close attention if this goes how I expect it to go. I know a lot of people just drop in from the shorts feed. You never know what it's going to look like. So that being said, tons of trades for me to talk about, 7 to be exact. Jamal says Greg Newsome, maybe he's one of them. But I'm going to go in order of least realistic to most realistic. Before I get there, though, I got to drop the intro, and we'll be right back. All right. Welcome back to Last Second Sports. We are giving you our take down to the last second. All right. No, the phone is not supposed to be turned to landscape. This is on purpose. It is by design. This is showing up in the shorts feed. So if you notice, it looks a little bit different. If you look at the screen at the top right, there's 3 dots. You can click those 3 dots. That's how you hit the like button. This is supposed to help push it out to the algorithm. And YouTube's pushing this. They like the vertical video thing. I think they're trying to compete with Instagram, TikTok, what have you. That being said, I know it's a little bit different. Those of you that are regular, it's a little bit different, but we're going to try it. We're going to try something new. I'm not afraid to try something new, but here we go. Let's talk about some trade possibilities for the San Francisco 49ers. And like I said, I'm going to go from least realistic to most realistic. So, trade number 1, least realistic on my list, a guy that I would love to have, a guy that when he was a free agent, I remember Vish and I were arguing about whether or not he would be a good fit with the 49ers. I said he would be a great fit. Vish disagreed, and maybe he wouldn't have been. Obviously, a little bit of a different style pass rusher. That being said, number 7 on my list, least realistic trade possibility of the 7 I have here, Hassan Reddick. Now, Hassan Reddick, as you know, took out Brock Purdy's arm a couple years ago in the playoffs. Brutal ending to the NFC Championship game just 2 short years ago. Definitely had some back and forth with some 49ers players, but this is professional football. I don't believe that those are fences that can't be mended. He has been given permission to seek a trade. Now, I don't know if that means he's going to get traded. I don't necessarily know if the 49ers and Eagles would be willing to deal with each other. But before you say, hey, it's just impossible, there's no way the Eagles would help the 49ers out. Teams trade within their division. We've seen this happen. I mean, the Lions just recently traded Hawkinson, who was an elite tight end, young tight end, to the Minnesota Vikings in the middle of a season. That happened just a season ago. So it's not unprecedented that a player would get traded to a rival team. What teams look at is what is the compensation? Who provides the most compensation or best compensation? And that's usually who they go with. Now, I think bad franchises often overlook that. I know that there was a rumor a couple years ago that when the 49ers were interested in Khalil Mack before he got traded from the Raiders to the Bears, that the 49ers actually gave better compensation to the Raiders. but the Raiders were unwilling to trade him to the 49ers. That's what bad organizations do. If the 49ers came to the Eagles, said, hey, this is the offer, and it was the best one they had, I think they would be inclined to take it. That being said, Hassan Reddick is very expensive. He's going to be 30 years old this season, and he's only got 1 year left on his deal before he is a free agent. So I don't think it's the most realistic trade, but I do think it's possible. While he's shopping for trade options, I think that it's a possibility. Now, Hassan Reddick plays pretty much every game. That's one thing I like about him. Just last year, he played all 17 games. I believe he did the year before. He's always getting into double-digit sacks. Last year, he had 11 sacks, 23 quarterback hits, and we know how he can wreak havoc on his own. He's absolutely incredible. Opposite of Bosa, could you imagine? I could. I think the 49ers, actually, their pass rush, in my opinion, was at their best in 2019. Anytime D Ford was on the field, this pass rush was the best it had ever been. And that wasn't very often, unfortunately, but D Ford was a pure speed rusher, little bit light in the pants, not extremely big like some of these other defensive ends that I'm going to talk about, but he had the speed and he had the bend, and that's exactly what Hassan Reddick brings. So I think Reddick, if he gets traded, will go for a second-round pick. If the 49ers offered a second-round pick for Reddick, I would be all for it. Before we get to the next one, please, if you could, hit the 3 dots in the upper right-hand corner. Hit the like button. That's going to push this out to more people. Like I said, trying something new with the vertical video, something that YouTube is trying to push. Want to see how it goes. I'm always willing to try something new. So hit the 3 dots in the upper right-hand corner, a little bit different than what you're used to. Hit those 3 dots. Hit the like button. That'll get it out to more people. Appreciate y'all. Much love. All right. Let's get to trade number 2. Ironically enough, also Philadelphia Eagle, also an edge, Josh Sweat. Now, Josh Sweat is supposedly available as well, or at least teams are calling about him. A little bit younger than Hassan Reddick, not as productive, 27 years old. He will also be a free agent in 2025. This last year, played all 17 games, had 6.5 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, and 23 quarterback hits. Pretty productive. Would love to have Josh Sweat. A little bit different pass rusher than Reddick, not quite all speed, a little bit bigger. He's around 265 pounds, if I'm not mistaken. But I also think, even though Sweat's a little bit younger, I think that if it takes a second to get Reddick, I think Sweat could be had for a third. So once again, not as realistic as maybe some of these other ones on the list, but also a possibility. So far we've got number 7 and number 6. We've got Hassan Reddick and we've got Josh Sweat. All right, let's go to trade number 5. Now, I know this one's been talked about a ton. I've got a lot of questions about it. I think losing to this team in the Super Bowl, seeing these players from the Chiefs up front, gets you a little bit more excited. And a lot of people had hoped, all right, maybe Chris Jones will become available. I never thought that was realistic. I thought the Chiefs would absolutely sign him. They did. Once they franchise tag L'Jarius Sneed, it was pretty clear that Jones was going to be a target for a long-term deal and that Sneed likely would be a trade candidate. Now, that doesn't mean they can't sign him long-term or even let him play on this franchise tag, but I think he'll likely be traded. Now, a team that worries me if he were to go to them would be the Detroit Lions. The Detroit Lions have a lot of money. There's actually a couple players on this list that I think they could go after, but they have a ton of money. They have the draft capital. They need secondary players. Don't be shocked if L'Jarius Sneed ends up with the Detroit Lions, making them better. Now, I heard that there was a corner for the Chiefs if you think that they're just going to get worse overnight. First of all, they draft very good. But I heard that there was a corner for the Chiefs that is young, might arguably be their best corner, didn't even play this year. I don't know how true that is. I don't even know the kid's name. It was just something in passing that I had heard from a Chiefs fan. Don't know how true that is, but they are usually pretty confident when they're trading big name players, Charvarius Ward, when they let Frank Clark walk, when they traded Tyreek Hill. They always have a plan in place. So if they let go of L'Jarius Sneed, 27 years old this year, he's playing on the franchise tag. You would have to work out a long-term deal. I think realistically, a second-round pick for him is what you're going to get because you have to work the long-term deal. This year, he played 16 games. He had 2 interceptions, 14 pass defense, 600 coverage snaps, gave up just 42 catches and 600 coverage snaps, 0 touchdowns and 406 total yards. He's a true number 1 corner. You pair him with Charvarius Ward, Demo playing nickel. I mean, your secondary is absolutely stout. Now, a little bit more realistic, in my opinion, than number 7 and 6. Obviously, that's why I have it at number 5 as far as realistic possibilities, but possible. He's going to get traded. I don't think the Chiefs would be afraid to trade him to the 49ers by any means. I just don't know that the 49ers are going to want to pay big top tier money to a 27-year-old corner in L'Jarius Sneed. They've got some other needs. I do think there's a corner that is a little bit more realistic, fits a little bit better in their budget, and might be a better fit anyways for the 49ers. L'Jarius Sneed being 27, a little bit older. You know, you probably 30, 31 is usually when corners start to tap out a little bit. So if you sign him, you'd want it to be like a 4-year deal. But a second-round pick, I think, gets it done. And L'Jarius Sneed will end up somewhere. Hopefully not Detroit. Maybe the 49ers. But, you know, maybe not as well. What are you guys saying in the chat here? Jam says he likes the video format. All right. It's a little bit different, right? Long form. DP says, if we get Greg Newsome, that would be a solid move to shore up the third level of our defense. Oh, you are reading my mind. Cub says, oh boy, last time I tried something new. Damn, that was a good night. Oh, you guys are wild. Absolutely love it. Let's see. I think that linebacker wise, you're probably going to either get that in the draft. One of the young guys, remember, they did draft 2 guys last year as well. And I think Graham's going to be really good, or has the possibility at least. Ex-safety himself. The 49ers do a great job of this, where they draft linebackers that were ex-safeties, Fred Warner, Dre Greenlaw, and they turn them into something special. Maybe Jalen Graham fits that mold. But also, you know, Levante David, I think, is a free agent. I think he makes a lot of sense. I think last year he played on a 1-year deal around $4.5 million. Now going from Florida to California, that's a big move. Also, you're getting a state income tax, so maybe you'd have to pay him closer to $5 million to make it work, $5.5 million. But I think that's realistic. It's a 1-year deal. Azeez Al-Shaair, I know a lot of people want Azeez, but Azeez is going to want a multi-year deal worth more than $5 million. And the 49ers are only going to be able to promise him a lot of playing time until Dre Greenlaw is back and healthy. Maybe that's 1 full season, but after that, is that where Azeez really wants to be? I know he loves it here. I know he was here during the playoffs, breaking things down. I get all of those things, but he still wants to get paid. He still wants a multi-year deal, and he still wants to play football. His best chance to get those things are not, in my opinion, in San Francisco. So I think he'll likely end up somewhere else, but Levante David could be a 1-year stopgap. So maybe that is it. Yep, I did see that the Niners signed Ben Barch. Wow, that one's exciting. Just kidding. All right, top right corner, hit the 3 dots, hit the like button for me. That'll push it out to the algorithm to get more people in here. Appreciate each and every one of you rocking with the new format, just to try out something new, going with the long format, the vertical format rather, and seeing how that works. All right, so we've done trade number 7 was Hassan Reddick. As far as realistic, 7th most realistic trade on my list was Hassan Reddick for a 2nd-round pick. 6th most was Josh Sweat for a 3rd-round pick. 5th most realistic for a 2nd-round pick was L'Jarius Sneed. 4th most realistic trade, Brian Burns, Panthers. Now, this one's going to take a haul. It's going to be a first round pick plus some. You're probably going to have to give up first and a third, first and a fourth, maybe a first and a second next year, something like that. It's not going to take a mid-round pick to get this done. Brian Burns is going to command a lot. He's just 26 years old. He's elite. He's playing, or set to play rather, on the franchise tag. Last year, played 16 games, 8 sacks, 1 forced fumble, and 18 quarterback hits. Now, also keep in mind, he's like the main guy over there. So he's constantly getting the toughest matchups, getting double teamed. But Brian Burns is an absolute stud. I shout out to Brad Graham. I know that he's been big on Brian Burns for like 4 years. Maybe one day, Brad, you'll speak it into existence. I don't know if that's something the 49ers can afford, but if you're going all in, this is like about as all in as you can go. Go get Brian Burns. And just for the fact that the 49ers have been tied to him for a couple of years, also that the Rams have been tied to him, and if the Rams are going after him, the 49ers are likely going to kick the tires on him because they don't want him to end up in division. I could see the 49ers trying to push over the top if the Rams make a serious push and maybe try to land a Brian Burns. Now, again, not the most realistic trade on my board here, but I think it is a little bit more realistic than the other three, just because 2 of the other 3 play for Philadelphia. And although I think it's possible that those guys could still get traded here, I don't think it's as likely as Brian Burns. And obviously, L'Jarius Sneed, I think the Chiefs would have zero issue trading to the 49ers. But I don't know that the 49ers would be willing to pay L'Jarius Sneed at 27 years old and give up probably a second-round pick to get it done. So I think number 4 on my list, Brian Burns for a first plus some, is a little bit more realistic than the other 3 that I mentioned. All right. You're going to see a theme here. Like edge rushers, cornerbacks, edge rushers, cornerbacks, edge rushers, cornerbacks. That's all that the 49ers, I think, are likely to trade for, especially if it's a bigger trade that makes an impact. Number 3 on my list is the brother of Nick Bosa. That is Joey Bosa. Now, I would actually probably have this one and the next one a little bit higher, but I think that he's going to be a cut possibility. It's very possible he just gets cut and then can sign wherever he wants. The problem with Joey, though, is he just can't stay healthy. He's 29 years old. You would think he's older, by the way. He's been in the league for a long time. He's going to play this next year at 29 years old. Not as old as you would think, but he's just injured every single year. He's set to become a free agent in 2026. That's a little bit worrisome. That's why I don't have him higher on the list as well, because if they do trade for him, they're going to have to pay him $33 million in 2025 or rework that contract. Again, kicking the can down the road, not my favorite thing with players that are approaching 30 or on the other side of 30. We've talked about that here on Last Second Sports, that approach with some of the 49ers players that are in-house. Guys like Eric Armstead, I don't want them to rework that deal. Didn't want them to last year, and they did. Didn't want them to do that for Kittle. They did. But every time you do that, you're adding more years onto the end of the contract. Yes, you're freeing up money up front, but there's always a time that you have to pay the piper. Joey Bosa, if they were to trade for him, would be just 29 years old. I know, shocking, but wouldn't be a free agent until 2026 and would have to pay him nearly $33 million in 2025. That's a lot of money, knowing what else is on the books for a guy that played just 9 games last year, but did have 6.5 sacks in those 9 games and 8 quarterback hits. I mean, he's still a productive pass rusher when healthy, but that when healthy is a big, big need. And I agree, Alive, listen, we do need offensive line, but these are just trade targets, okay? Keep in mind that most of these guys I'm talking about trading for are not going to require a first-round pick. In fact, the only one that would, in my opinion, would be Brian Burns. But they can draft an offensive lineman, right? So you can go draft a guy. You also can go in free agency and get people. I know free agency starts tomorrow, but there are trade possibilities out there, and that's why I want to float those out there as well, because I think that we're so set on free agency, which great, we should be. That's the next thing. in the draft that we forget that there are players available for trade and guys that make a lot of sense to the San Francisco 49ers, depending on what they do in free agency. Maybe they can get some of these talented players to be 49ers trade mid-round picks or second-round picks or later, still get the offensive lineman in round one, and end up making their team much better. So I know that teams are looking, as Jam says, hey, we're looking to see if they get released. I get it. But if they get released, there's no guarantee that they end up with you. So Joey Bosa, less realistic, in my opinion, than number 2 on my list, which happens to be Khalil Mack. I think if you were to trade for a Joey Bosa, it would only take like a 5th round pick, not a lot. The fact that you're going to trade a late round pick for Joey Bosa, you're going to get him on 2-year deal. The first year, most of that's going to be paid by the Chargers, so not bad. And you guarantee that he's on your team and on the books for the next couple of years. That's why you would want to trade for him versus letting him get out there in free agency. But if you let him go to free agency and don't trade for him, you can rework a contract that's more realistic for the 2025 season. Maybe you do a 1-year prove-it deal, what have you, and you can get him here for no draft pick. So I could see either or, but I could also see a team saying, hey, we want him on the team. We don't want him to hit free agency because we can't control where he signs. We'll give a late round pick and we'll see if we can make it work. That's a possibility as well. I have Bosa number 3 on my list as far as trades in the realistic level. Khalil Mack, I have at number 2. Now, Khalil Mack, all the things I just said about Bosa, even better for Khalil Mack. To me, Khalil Mack would be worth a 4th round pick to get on the roster and not let him hit free agency. And I'll tell you why. Don't let him get cut and figure out where he wants to go. Go get him if you want him. He's only under contract this next year. A lot of that salary, if he's traded, would be paid by the Rams anyways, or excuse me, by the Chargers anyways. So why not? Why not go get him before he hits the market? Don't let him cut him. It's not going to be expensive to bring him in. He's only going to be on a 1-year deal. Trade a 4th for him, something like that, and let him come here and ball out for a season. He played 17 games last year, had 17 sacks. That is not a typo. 17 games, 17 sacks for Khalil Mack, who is 32 years old, about to play this next year at 33. 5 forced fumbles and 22 quarterback hits. That is beyond elite production at 33 years old. You guarantee he ends up on the roster. A lot of that salary, like I said, is paid for by the Chargers. Give him a 4th round pick and bring him over. I think it's very realistic. Him more so than Bosa, because it's a 1-year deal that teams would say, hey, I'm interested. Yes, we're waiting to see if he gets cut. But if there's going to be teams lining up for him, and there would be, by the way, if he were to just hit the open market, guarantee he's on your roster by trading a 4th, maybe even a 5th round pick and make it happen. That makes a lot of sense to me. That's why I have Khalil Mack at number 2 on my list. Kaylee, appreciate you. You said that you subscribed. Did you, by the way, Kaylee, did you see this in the shorts feed by chance? Just out of curiosity, because I am trying this for the first time. And I don't know how StreamYard works, if it's going to kick it to the shorts feed like I'm hoping it would, or how that would work. So if you could answer, that'd be great. All right. So let me recap the list real quick and recap exactly what we're doing. So 7 trade possibilities for the San Francisco 49ers, listing them from least realistic to most realistic. So number 7, least realistic trade on my list is Hassan Reddick for a 2nd round pick, edge rusher from the Philadelphia Eagles. Number 6 on my list, another edge rusher from the Philadelphia Eagles for a 3rd round pick, Josh Sweat. Number 5 on my list, L'Jarius Sneed, corner, Kansas City Chiefs for a 2nd. Number 4 on my list, Brian Burns. Now, that one would take a lot. It would take a 1st round plus some, I believe, to get it done from the Panthers. Number 3 on my list, Joey Bosa for a 5th round pick from the Chargers. And number 2 on my list, Khalil Mack for a 4th round pick from the Chargers. Number 1 on my list, some of you have already guessed it. And Marco, I know, was on with Grant earlier. But before he went on with Grant, he'd actually thrown out in our chat, this is a possibility. And I love it. So shout out to Marco for this possibility. I don't know if you want this out there, Marco. So I'm just going to just keep it to myself and say that it's an idea you came up with. All right. You let me know if I can say the real story behind it. If not, it's cool. But for now, we'll leave it as the player that you came up with. And that is Greg Newsome from the Browns. Okay, let it out there. All right, perfect. So this isn't just an idea. Those of you who know Marco and follow Marco know that he gets some inside stuff sometimes. And this is nothing crazy. They're not going to trade for him for sure. But the Lions are kicking around a Greg Newsome trade possibility. And the 49ers have reached out, according to him, on Greg Newsome as well, just to see what it would take. Nothing is imminent. Nothing is guaranteed. But the fact that they're sniffing around makes this pretty realistic, right? We know for sure that they're sniffing around on Greg Newsome. The other ones, I would assume that maybe they've picked up the phone on. John Lynch is pretty aggressive. This one I know for sure that they have. So that being said, that's why he's number 1 on the list, Greg Newsome. All right. So Greg Newsome, to me, I don't know what it would take for sure. I know that Snead's going for a second, and on the surface, you're thinking, okay, well, if Snead's going for a second, that means Newsome for a third, maybe a third and a fourth is realistic. I actually think Newsome might go for a second as well. And let me explain why. But if not a second, I think a third and a fourth would probably also be a possibility. I think it's going to take a second to get it done. The reason is because he's less expensive than Snead. He's going to be, I think he's going in on his 5th-year option, right? Marco, if I'm not mistaken. I think this next year is his 5th-year option. So you're going to have to re-sign him as well. No, he's going in on his 4th year. You're going to have to pick up the 5th-year option and then rework a deal next year. He was the year after Brandon Ayuk, if I'm not mistaken. I think. Maybe it was the same year. Anyways, probably should have been more prepared on that. Either way, less expensive than Snead. Also younger than Snead. Just 24 years old. He's going to play next year. Okay, yeah. There we go. Jamal, perfect. So this year is going to be year 4. Then he's going into his 5th-year option. So you've got him a couple years less expensive before you're going to have to pay him big time money. And I like his versatility. So Greg Newsome, when he was coming out of college, you guys are going to laugh at me now because this was not a great take in hindsight. But that year, I had it as J.C. Horn was my number 1 corner. Newsome was my number 2. I don't even want to say this out loud, but Surtain was my number 3 corner. I know. Listen, most people had Surtain as a number 1 corner. I'm not a corner scout by any means. That was just my opinion coming out of the draft. The reason I like Newsome as my number 2 corner was because he was so versatile. He could play in the slot, and we have seen that a lot as well. He can also play on the outside. And I think having positionless football in the secondary for the 49ers is an asset. And that's why I like Greg Newsome. So younger than Snead, less expensive than Snead. That's why I think it'll probably take a 2nd-round pick. Plus, he was drafted for a 1st. But just 24 years old, his 5th-year option in 2025, played 14 games last year, had 2 interceptions, 14 passes defense, had 397 snaps lined up in the slot, 276 lined up outside. We talk about Diameter Lenore and his versatility. Greg Newsome is also very, very versatile. So imagine the 49ers have an injury. Let's say Lenore goes down. Well, we know that nickel corners are very, very hard to find. So at that sense, what you could do is you could play Greg Newsome on the outside. And then if you have a corner that is better suited for the outside, when you go with 3 corners, you go with those nickel packages, those dime packages, what have you. They rarely go dime, by the way. But when they go with those nickel packages, you could kick Newsome to the slot, to that nickel corner, and allow him to play in there and do it comfortably. And then let the other corner, if he's best suited for the outside, whoever that is, let's say Ambry Thomas, what have you, You have that versatility. That's what I like about Newsome. So again, younger than Snead, cheaper than Snead, more versatility than Snead at this point in his career. That's why I think it's going to take a second round pick. I don't think that the Browns would prefer to get rid of him, but I think they're going to have to choose one of their three corners to likely go. You can't pay all three. They're all very, very good. I think Newsome is probably the easiest to move on from at this point. And the 49ers, if they could give a second round pick, I would absolutely love it. But much like I said with Snead, look at it. I mean, the Detroit Lions, if they're in on Snead, they're going to be in also on Greg Newsome. Rumors are out there that they are in on him. Those have been printed and published. So we'll see. But the 49ers have kicked tires on him as well. They have reached out, whatever that means. Last year, he gave up 455 yards and 2 touchdowns. That is my number one most realistic trade possibility. So, biggest issue is the Lions. You're right, man. That is absolutely the biggest issue. Jamal says, got to consider life after Demo potentially too. Demo is an unrestricted free agent after this year. Bringing in a guy like Newsome gives your team control for 2 years, potentially work out a long-term deal. Very, very good point. I mean, it's not only an injury thing, but if Demo asks for a lot of money, that allows you to stay versatile in the secondary. Keep Newsome because, frankly, he's better than Deommodore Lenoir. I love Deommodore Lenoir, but Newsome's a better player. He just is. And if you have to move on from Demo, then Newsome can be your outside guy. You can kick him in whenever you want. You keep that versatility. I love it. I think it's a very smart comment by you, Jamal. I would still keep Demo on the inside. And Newsome would be my outside corner unless Demo got injured, or to Jamal's point, if you were going to move on from Demo, then Newsome would be your guy. But I'm telling you, man, Deommodore Lenoir, also very good. Greg Newsome's a very good corner, man. Northwestern, I'm pretty sure he came out of. I really, 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 really liked him a ton coming out of that draft. I just told you Adam is my number 2 corner, and he's played fantastic, man. Absolutely fantastic, very versatile, just a good player. And he had to play a lot of snaps as even like the number 1 guy a couple times this year because they had injuries in that secondary. So for me, I would love to get Newsome in the 49ers uniform. Brother Bob says, am I the first super chat on the shorty shorts? You are. I didn't even know if you could do a super chat or not. If you can, like I said, 3 dots, upper right-hand corner, hit the like button, push it out to more people. This is showing up in the shorts feed, also showing up in the live feed for those of you that are subscribers. That's why it looks weird. I know some of you are not big fans of it. Not going to be doing this every time. But if I go solo, I think this is the way to go. Just try something new, see how the algorithm likes it, and just kind of go from there. Now, I know that there are some other rumors out there as far as free agency goes. We just talked about some trade possibilities, but there are some rumors out there as far as free agency goes. Lavonte David being a possibility. He makes a ton of sense for the San Francisco 49ers, just for the simple fact that they are trying to fill in for Greenlaw, not even for the full year, but maybe it's the first 4 weeks, first 6 weeks. I know there's an outside possibility that Greenlaw comes back week 1. I don't want him to press it, though. I want him to come back fully healthy, ready to go. And by the end of the season, hopefully he's Dre Greenlaw again. And David, being a guy that's a little bit older, maybe it makes more sense for him to come here, play in spot duty, replace Greenlaw until Greenlaw can get healthy, play on a 1-year deal, $5.5 million. Last year, he was at $4.5 million for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Although there's no state income tax, so keep that in mind. Going to the 49ers, he might ask for a little bit more money, but it's a 1-year deal. Makes a lot of sense. DJ Jones, if he gets cut, would make a lot of sense as well. I know a lot of people want to bring him in. I do have to ask, though, and Jamal, I know that you're in the chat. I know that you responded to me on Twitter. I like DJ Jones. I like Azeez Al-Shaair. But there is an infatuation where 49ers fans want to bring back a bunch of ex-49ers. It's not just those two. I've heard other names floated out there. Why? Well, I mean, I get maybe one, but why a bunch of them? These guys were already on the team and they didn't win a Super Bowl. If the point is to win a Super Bowl, why would you go just bring back older 49ers that have been here that we know are good players, but didn't win a Super Bowl while they were here? Like, what would be different this time around? They have to do something different. That's why I'm willing to get rid of guys like Juice to free up money and put those assets somewhere else. That's why I'd be willing to at least listen to trades for a Debo Samuel or something like that. So for me, I'm trying to do something different. I want to see the 49ers go after players that haven't necessarily been here. I'm not saying that maybe one or two, not even two, maybe one DJ Jones makes a lot of sense. But if they brought in him and Aziz, both good players, I just don't think that that's a way to win a Super Bowl. They were here already. They didn't win with them. So that's just my 2 cents. I don't necessarily understand why everybody wants to bring in a bunch of old 49ers. I think the only thing I can think of is that, people don't watch all the teams around the league. They don't know every name around the league, which is fair. I mean, you only have so much time. So ex 49ers and you know that those guys are good players. And so you say, hey, they're available, bring them back. I get it. Just to me, if you're trying to win a Super Bowl, do something a little bit different. Don't bring back a bunch of ex 49ers. I don't think that's the way to get it done. Who else is out there? Listen, I know that a lot of people are going to say it's not realistic, and a lot of people push back when I said this about a month ago, but it seems like steam is picking up around Danielle Hunter and the 49ers. I still think that it's more realistic than what people think. You have to remember the 49ers for 2 years, much like the Brian Burns thing, where, first of all, with Brian Burns, they'd have to give up a first-round pick plus some. He was number 4, I think, on my list as far as realistic trade possibilities. And the reason is because they've been linked to him for a couple years. Danielle Hunter is no different. The 49ers were linked to Danielle Hunter for not only 2 straight trade deadlines, but when they were reworking his deal to stay in Minnesota, he was on the rumored docket for the 49ers then as well. So why not? He's free and clear. He's an absolute stud. I mean, go look at his numbers. Absolute stud. Was really the only real good guy on that defensive line, much like Brian Burns is for the Panthers. There's some good players over there, but as far as pass rushers go, Minnesota's defensive line is not stacked with a lot of talent. Danielle Hunter, very, very good player, still very productive. And depending on how you work a contract, let's say you do a 3-year deal with him, give him a ton of money in year 2. Give him a signing bonus. Don't give him a lot of money this year so that the salary cap stays low. Boost that money up next year, because what's going to happen is Armstead is off the books next year. That's about $28 million less than what you're spending this year. It's more realistic that you maybe move on from a Debo or a Kittle next year as well, even a Juice. So there's going to be money there that they can spend. If you push that contract into a heavy year 2, heavy year 3 deal, you'll be fine. You can make it happen. So don't think the 49ers can't make a splash deal here. They can. It's just they're just going to have to be creative with it. They're going to have to maneuver a little bit. They're going to have to be creative. I really think that Danielle Hunter is a possibility. Again, the thing that worries me, though, is there are teams like Detroit that have a ton of money and they have a need. I could see them going there. But the Rams, if they're in on Burns, you've got to imagine they're going to be in on Danielle Hunter, because you don't have to give up anything. You pair him with the Donald and some of those other young players they have there, all of a sudden that defensive line is very formidable. The 49ers would be hard-pressed not to go try to beef up their offensive line at that point, because that defensive line will be absolutely nasty. Then there are rumors that the Seattle Seahawks, no surprise here, are heavily in on Patrick Queen. That makes way too much sense. They might be in on Jadeveon Clowney as well. So, Seattle ends up with one or both of those guys. All of a sudden, their defense is better as well. So there's some teams around the 49ers that are going to be getting better very quickly. And I'm just excited because free agency is going to start essentially tomorrow, the tampering period, but we're going to hear of a lot of deals going down in the first 24 hours. It was just one short year ago that the Hargrave deal went down very, very quickly. And it's funny because I remember that I tweeted, I don't expect anything to happen for the 49ers until the official free agency period to starts. And about an hour later, they signed Hargrave, which was stupid of me because I mentioned Marco earlier and how he said that Newsome is a guy that the 49ers are interested in. He told me last year, I could show you guys the text. I'm not going to show you now, but he told me last year, he's like, by the way, just so you know, the 49ers have heavy interest in Javon Hargrave. Don't be surprised if he's their big splash deal early on. And I was like, yeah, I get it, Marco. You're right a lot. You hear a lot of things, but I don't know how true it is. If they sign him, I think it'll be when the official tampering period is over and then the official free agency opens. I was wrong an hour later, and everybody bombed on me, deservedly so. That's what social media is for. Definitely deserved that one, but was happy that they made the deal for Javon Hargrave, which oddly enough, I don't know if you guys caught this, but Sports Illustrated put out their list of worst signings in last year's free agency. They have Javon Hargrave as the number one worst signing last year in free agency. I don't know if Sports Illustrated understands, but there was a guy named Mike McGlinchey that went to the Denver Broncos for big money. He's absolutely atrocious. So I don't know how Javon Hargrave is worse of a pickup than what Mike McGlinchey was, but that's just their opinion. I don't know that I necessarily agree with that. Yes, Hargrave may not have lived up to the expectations fully, but I would say that he's still a better player than Mike McGlinchey. But Albert, I don't know that he went Albert Hainsworth on us. Also, we didn't pay near as much, at least like percentage of cap wise, to what the Redskins at that time paid for Albert Hainsworth. That was an awful deal. Let me ask you this before I get out of here. Yeah, I know. Before I get out of here, why don't you guys tell me one free agent that you know the 49ers are not going to sign, right? We just spent 45 minutes on the 49ers, but give me one free agent that you know the 49ers are not going to sign, but you're excited to see where they go or worried about where they may go. Danielle Hunter, I think, is one. If the 49ers don't sign him, I think he could end up in division. I think Patrick Queen, obviously, we talked about Seattle. I'm curious to see where Saquon Barkley goes. Not worried about it necessarily, but I'm just curious to see where he goes. I like Saquon Barkley. I'm glad that he got his career kind of back on track, and he's not going to end up with the Giants, it seems like. So just for fun, I'm curious to see where he goes. I think that'll be a lot of fun. All right, Steve-O. Wow. Nice. Cousins, yeah. Does he stay or does he go to the Falcons? Curious to see. Kendrick Bourne. Grenard, okay. Saquon to the Texans, man. That's a really good fit. Marco. Justin Simmons, okay. Cousins. You think Barkley to the Cowboys? Oh, I think Derrick Henry, this is a good one too. I think Derrick Henry might end up with the Ravens. Could be wrong, but we'll see. Yeah, he is. I saw that last night. Henry to Dallas? Yeah, I don't know. Dallas is going to sign somebody, one of those guys. I'm curious to see for sure. But Barkley, for me, he's one that I'm just really excited to see where he ends up. You think Henry to the Cowboys? Is that inside information or a guess? Yeah, Kendrick Bourne staying with the Pats. What do you guys think of Mac Jones going to the Jags? Is it official? Can I say this now? Half jokingly, of course. But can we just say, like, regardless of what your thoughts are of Trey Lance, that the league thinks that Trey Lance is better than Mac Jones as well, or at least has more potential? The fact that he went for a 4th and Mac Jones went for a 6th. I know that Trey Lance didn't pan out here, and you guys want to like kill me for that, but it's still possible. I mean, it's not possible. I think he's better than Mac Jones, or at least would have a brighter future if given a chance. Certainly better than what Zach Wilson put out there. I mean, really, all I said was he was the second best quarterback in the draft. I mean, Justin Fields right now has that crown. But if Trey Lance played, maybe he would be number 2. Overall, the quarterback class wasn't great. But how weird is it that Mac Jones is now backing up the number 1 pick in that draft? And why? I mean, that's kind of expensive for a backup quarterback. That one, That one's a little bit weird to me. Also, if you don't know, in division, Mike McDonald is not set on starting Geno Smith as his quarterback. He's open to all possibilities. He's open to free agent quarterbacks. He's open to drafting a quarterback. He is not locking in Geno Smith as the starter next year. I think that's interesting. So I don't know. We'll see. We're going to have to keep an eye. That's the other thing with free agency. It's not just the 49ers. We got to keep an eye on all the NFC contenders. Really, I'm looking at Detroit. I'm looking at the Rams. I'm looking at the Seahawks, of course, in division. Packers, that's another team. They're up and coming. Who else? Is there anybody? Cowboys just don't worry me. Eagles don't worry me. Those teams, I'm not really, I don't care who they bring in. It'd have to be something crazy for me to be like, okay, they're serious. But I think Seattle, the Rams, and especially Detroit, those teams, I'm going to be watching their wire very closely. Who are they signing? Who are they trading for? Just as closely as I'm looking at the San Francisco 49ers, which obviously that's our team. We want to see who they bring in. But how are these other teams improving? That's going to be important. And expect some videos very rapidly tomorrow as soon as some of these bigger signings happening, how they impact the 49ers, whether they are the 49ers or not that are making these signings. I'm curious to see how it impacts the San Francisco 49ers. Russell Wilson back to the Seahawks. That would be interesting. That would be definitely interesting. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Imagine if they signed Hunter and then traded for Newsome or Snead. Ooh, Christian Wilkins. That's a good. Why didn't I think of him? Yeah, Christian Wilkins. Not for the 49ers, by the way, but where he goes. Texans. That would be another really good fit. He's a really good player. Really, really, really good player. I can see you, Dale. I got you. See, you said what's up in there. Post it for VP. I got you, Dale. I got you. Clarzard says, Jesse, are you worried about Adam Peters might end up drafting Masterclass every year for the Commanders? I'm not worried about what he does for the Commanders per se. I am, however, worried about what he possibly brought to the San Francisco 49ers. I mean, if he has the blueprint for this year's draft, maybe he steps on the 49ers' toes, and then in the future, who are the guys that are going to fill in for him? This is the interesting thing about a guy like Adam Peters or some of these front office guys. Until they leave, you don't really know the impact. Like, we've made guesses. We said, okay, well, the bad third round picks, those are Kyle. Those are assumptions. Maybe the first couple rounds were going to be John Lynch's picks. Whatever you think of those, some have been big hits, some have been misses. And then the assumption is these later round picks, the Fred Warners, the Kittles, some of the Diamador Lenore, Huff, these were the Adam Peters picks. That's the assumption. Now, we don't know that for sure, but I'm very curious to see this year's draft if they have some of those late round hits the way that they always have. I don't know. I don't know if that's the case. And if the 49ers don't have them and the Commanders start getting them, and that's a trend for, let's say, 2 years, well, then you can start to put together the piece of the puzzle and say, oh, well, maybe it was Adam Peters that had rounds 5 through 7 or 4 through 7. But until he actually starts making these picks and we see what the impact is a couple years down the road, it's going to be really, really hard to tell what the 49ers are missing out on and what they have missed out on now that Adam Peters is gone and what they had in-house. I don't know. We'll have to see. I mean, it's all speculation at this point. The Packers don't worry me, but I'm definitely keeping an eye on them for sure. I mean, they're a young team. They're up and coming. They now have playoff experience. They're not going anywhere. I mean, you would expect for them to get better. Their money situation, however, isn't as good as teams like Detroit or the Rams. And so I think that might handcuff them a little bit as far as this free agency period. But if they continue to draft well, they've never been big players in free agency anyways. Like, that's not the way the Packers have done things. They're going to draft well the way that they usually do, and that's how they're going to build. And because they are young, the rookies that they draft are going to contribute a lot more than maybe a team like the 49ers. Those guys will make immediate impact. So watch for them more so in the draft than free agency. Not worried about them, but definitely keeping an eye because they are up and coming. And, always curious to see what some of these younger teams can do. And they give the 49ers all they can handle in the playoffs. So before we get out of here, if you haven't, please subscribe. And then also hit the 3 dots in the upper right-hand corner. That's the like button. You can hit that, then hit like. It just helps push it out to the algorithm. Hopefully y'all like this different look, this shorts feed, the vertical feed. I'm going to be doing it more often. If I'm solo, that's when I'll do these types of shows. If I'm on with other people, I'm still going to keep the long form format. That's why you'll want to subscribe to get more 49ers content. And that'll be more in the traditional feed, not in the shorts feed. But it was fun, something a little bit different. Appreciate y'all. Have a blessed night. I'll be back at some point tomorrow talking free agency on the spot. Hopefully we'll have some big breaking news for the San Francisco 49ers. And if not, there's going to be breaking news around the league, and those things will impact the 49ers. So keep a close eye on all of these players and where they end up. Until tomorrow, peace.